I am. New York, without hesitation, votes
nothing.
I beg your pardon.
Nothing. Point of order, Mr. President.
Mr. Dickinson, in the middle of a vote, this seems hardly the time.
Our rules are very specific. A state, in order to be represented by a quorum, must have at least 2 delegates in the city. 2 in the city, gentlemen. New York has only 1. Therefore, Mr. Hamilton may not vote.
Gentleman from Delaware is correct. I'm sorry. With Massachusetts divided, New York ineligible, and New Hampshire absent, the compromise report passes in General Assembly. 5 states to 4.
We've done it.
This issue was the major issue for the small states. Once they got this, they were fine with everything else. The way there was an executive, the way the federal government worked, and the small states ended up ratifying the Constitution very quickly and by large margins in their states. So you can see here, when the states voted, look at Delaware and New Jersey. It was unanimous at their state ratifying conventions. Connecticut, still a landslide. Same with Maryland. New Hampshire was a little more mixed, but they still ratified it. So the main thing these states wanted was somewhere where they had a say. But they wanted to be in a country with all of these major states that would make them more secure and that they could benefit from that association with those states.
And now for other business.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Governor Randolph.
Mr. President, I move that this convention adjourn, that the large states might consider a compromise. A true compromise, not this sham which benefits only the small states.
Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Mr. Patterson.
Let the large states take a day to hatch their scheme. But we will never back down from this binding vote.
This convention is adjourned until tomorrow morning.
Mr. Madison, there's still a great many issues to debate in this convention.
So what they're showing us here with this scene is how defeated and depressed Madison was about the fact that the Senate wasn't going to be a Democratic body. He felt that for sure the Constitution wasn't going to work this way. He thought that this whole American experiment of the people governing themselves and creating their own government and running their own government without a king over them wasn't going to work now, because a major part of this new national government wasn't democratic and the people wouldn't like it. And then they show you a part where, as he's thinking about it, he comes to realize, well, maybe there is something useful to this. Maybe this could be worked to our advantage. See if you can see that part in the video.
You got out early this morning, Mr. Madison.
No good government can be built upon the foundation proposed by the small states. Nor will it.
I agree.
It's time to move on to other matters. The small states are fixed. We must yield on the representation issue.
At last, someone sees the truth of the matter. The small states have compromised, gentlemen. Now we must.
You are strangely quiet, Mr. Madison.
Judge Wilson and Dr. Franklin are correct. No one could be more disappointed than myself that the convention has chosen what to me seems an unjust system. This great compromise has created a new kind of nation, one such as I had never considered. Its national government is strong and sovereign, but it has states which are also strong, separate states, but a united people. It is neither man nor horse, but like the centaur, half of each. I don't know whether such a creature can survive in the rough and tumble of the world. But I am willing to make the hazard. I am for the compromise. I am for the United States of America.
So that was how they resolved the biggest issue at the convention. Now let's look and see what lessons we can learn from this great compromise. Because of the great compromise, the small states had a voice in this new national government, somewhere where they could say no, or somewhere there where their voice was at least equal to the other states. And because the House of Representatives was still apportioned by population, the big states still would get what they wanted, so they could push back against the small states, and they dominated in the House. So this was kind of a hybrid system, a system of both, a system that neither side really thought about before they came there. And nothing had ever been tried like this before on a continental scale. America is truly the first republic on a continental scale in the history of the world. Nobody before America had ever tried to govern a continent with all elected leaders. I know the judges aren't elected, but all the rest are elected. And that was truly an experiment. A lot of people didn't think it would work. So what they created was a federal system. A federal system is not a national system. A federal system is a system where there are two layers of government, and they share power, or they have different types of powers. So the states aren't totally independent. They're not their own little countries. But the national government doesn't have all power over them either. This system, I think the greatest strength of this system is that it is flexible. It allows the states to do their own thing to a large extent. So a state like Alabama is very different from a state like Vermont, but they're still in the same country. And the states can decide different things based on what their populations want. And this allows the federal government to focus on national things for the reasons that it was created, for things that the states can do well together as a group, but they can't do well as states alone. So we have this flexible type of hybrid system where the national government does certain things that it is good at, and the states do certain things that they are good at. And going along with the Madisonian idea of separation of powers, power is divided between the national government and the state governments. I like to compare it to iron and steel. Now I know probably scientifically this isn't 100% accurate, but just go with me on the idea. Iron is brittle. It's very strong, but it can be broken. It's not flexible. And steel is an alloy, meaning a mix of metals, that is very strong, but that can be flexed or bent or beaten up, and it can take quite a beating, and it won't break. I mean, within reason, eventually anything will break. But it is very strong, even when under stress, even when bent. And iron is not that way. And so I make the analogy that this is a mix of metals. This is a special metal. And this is just mostly iron. I know maybe there's a chemist out there who might say, well, it's actually an alloy of. Just go with me on this simple idea. I'm not a chemist. What are some lessons we can learn from the Great Compromise? Well, I think the biggest one that Madison learned, majoritarian tyranny, it's called. You can see the word majority in there, kind of. This is, some people call it mobocracy, or the majority just grabs hold of the government and then just starts abusing all the minority groups, all the groups that aren't in the majority. And this is bad government. And so republics try to fight against majoritarian tyranny by having a different structure that's not just 100% based on majority rule. It still responds to the will of the people, but it has checks in place to stop majoritarian tyranny. Another lesson is if you keep the minorities happy, the majority will still get what it wants in the end. The majority still controls most of the government. The minorities just have some protections of their rights against the majority. And that compromise can yield unexpected benefits. Most people didn't contemplate a federal system where you had kind of a national government, but kind of not a national government. Not a national government in the sense of France or Japan, where it's completely top down. And so this was a result of this fighting over the Senate. And a lot of people think that this is the strength of the United States. A lot of people don't think that too, but that is one of the arguments in favor of the system that we have, is that it keeps different regions of the country happy. A few more things we can learn about the founders from this. They had a common goal to create a long-lasting republic. A lot of them saw this as kind of the purpose of America, or that America had a destiny to establish a free government and kind of show the world that this was possible, that people could govern themselves. So they felt a great responsibility to see this through to the end and create a government that would actually work. They were patriots who had supported the cause of the United States during the war, and they cared a lot about the Union staying together. And so sometimes they chose what was best for the country instead of for themselves. Not in every case, but they had this common goal of, we got to keep this Union together. This is important for posterity, for our future generations.